My name is Sarah, and I recently turned 30. I've been married to Joey for a year and a half. When Joey, the man I'd always wanted to marry, proposed, I was thrilled. We both looked forward to a life full of memories, love, and supporting each other. Looking back, those were truly happy times. The first signs of trouble in my marriage started about 3 months after we got married. One day, I unexpectedly received a call from my mother-in-law, Grace, asking us to visit Joey's family home. Since Joey preferred that I be a stay-at-home wife, I spent most of my time doing household chores. Grace knew this, so when she called, I agreed and headed over to her house. When I arrived, Grace was waiting at the door. I greeted her, but she didn't respond like usual. Instead, she said, "Come in quickly, there's a lot I need you to do today," and led me into the living room. Confused, I asked, "What do you need me to do?" She pointed to the kitchen sink with her chin and said, "It's full of breakfast and lunch dishes. Go wash them." I was shocked and didn't know how to respond. Grace had always been friendly and kind whenever Joey and I visited before. I hesitated, but she snapped, "Why are you just standing there? Didn't you hear me? Wash the dishes." Startled by her sudden change in attitude, I quickly replied, "Okay," and went to the kitchen. My heart was pounding. I had never seen this side of Grace. Could this be harassment? The thought sent a chill through me. Not wanting to make her angrier, I washed and put away the dishes as quickly as possible. When I was done, I said, "Grace, I've finished the dishes." Without much reaction, she replied, "Good, now do the laundry, and after that, clean the house, including the stairs." Then, she laid down on the living room sofa and fell asleep. I stood there, completely lost. I didn't know where the cleaning supplies were or how she expected me to do the laundry in her house. Nervously, I asked, "Grace?" She snapped again, "I just told you what to do. You're my son's wife. Can't you handle this? Even my daughter, who's younger than you, does this perfectly." She then fell back asleep. I was stunned and felt frozen. Why was she comparing me to my sister-in-law, Lily? Frustrated, I decided to clean the house and do the laundry anyway, even though it seemed like my efforts didn't meet her expectations. I had to redo the laundry and cleaning because Grace wasn't satisfied. She constantly said things like, "If it were Lily, she would have gotten it right. Why can't you? You're unfit to be Joey's wife if you can't even manage household chores." How embarrassing. Her complaints never stopped. It suddenly dawned on me why Grace was being so harsh. She was comparing me to her perfect daughter, Lily, and couldn't stand that I didn't measure up. Lily is Joey's sister and my sister-in-law. She got married before us and lives with her in-laws, so we rarely see her. From the little I know of her, especially from our wedding, she seemed outgoing and easy to talk to, but since we've never had a deep conversation, I can't say for sure. Grace and my father-in-law, William, always seemed to favor Lily. I remember at our wedding, William said, "Look how cute Lily is in her party dress. She's stealing the spotlight from the bride." Grace agreed, and even Lily joked, "Hey, that's rude to Sarah." Joey and I laughed it off, but it stung a little. Ever since then, Grace and William have been comparing me to Lily, and my feelings towards her have become more negative. 3 months into our marriage, I talked to Joey about Grace's behavior. I told him, "I went to your parents' house today because Grace called me. I did the chores, but she kept comparing me to Lily and complained the whole time. Can you say something to her?" Joey replied, That doesn't sound like Mom, but okay, I'll talk to her." His tone bothered me, but I hoped he would handle it. Unfortunately, it only made things worse. Grace started calling me over even more, piling on chores and even making me do major shopping for her. At first, Joey would say, "All right, I'll tell Mom," but as time went on, he started saying, "Maybe you're just being too sensitive." Eventually, whenever I brought up Grace, he would sigh and say, "Look, maybe Mom's just trying to help you. Why not take it a bit more seriously?" Can you believe it? We had only been married for about a year, and Joey was already taking his mom's side over mine. I felt a wave of emptiness wash over me, filled with anger and sadness. I had moved past those feelings and reached a state of complete indifference. From then on, whenever I visited Joey's parents' house with him, Grace began ordering me around like it was expected. It seemed like she now thought Joey was on her side, so she didn't hesitate to assign all the household chores to me. Meanwhile, William, Grace, and Joey would sit in the living room enjoying tea. Whenever we ran out of snacks, Grace would say, "Sarah, you're so inconsiderate. If you see it running low, bring some more." Even Joey joined in, saying, "Sarah, more tea, please, make it stronger this time." He had started treating me just like Grace did. William wasn't any better. He would order me around too, saying things like, "Sarah, we're out of cigarettes, go get some." I wanted to scream, "Buy your own cigarettes, Joey, Grace, make your own tea and snacks," but I felt trapped and alone, and changing my situation seemed impossible. Fast forward a year and a half into our marriage, I was once again at Joey's family home. These days, Grace would call me over on Joey's days off, and we both felt obligated to go. I was pregnant and had just entered my 3rd trimester. I felt awful and honestly didn't want to be at Joey's family home at all. After learning about my pregnancy, Grace seemed more enthusiastic, saying, "I have so many things to teach you as a mother-to-be," but in reality, she just had me doing housework while neither Joey nor William lifted a finger to help. I was just following Grace's orders. I was experiencing periodic stomach cramps and discomfort, and I was even breaking out in cold sweats. Standing was becoming a real struggle. Despite this, Grace said, "Lily did housework even when she was pregnant. You know you're slacking off a bit, don't you?" Sure, my morning sickness hadn't been too severe, just some nausea and fatigue, but now, in my 3rd trimester, I felt weak and struggled just to stand. Hours later, while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, a sharp pain suddenly hit my stomach, and I crouched down. Just then, the front door opened, and I heard a loud voice call out, "We're home." It was Joey and William. I could hear them asking, "Ah, you're back, where's Mom?" It was clear that Lily had returned as footsteps approached. She walked into the kitchen and was startled to see me hunched over in pain. "What's going on, Sarah? Are you okay?" she asked, rushing over to me. I replied, "Sorry, my stomach's hurting a bit." Hearing this, Lily looked at my belly and awkwardly asked, "Sarah, could you be pregnant?" I thought Joey had told Lily since he said he would when I entered my 3rd trimester. Suddenly, Lily began to tremble, her face turning bright red, and she stormed out of the kitchen. "Mom, where are you?" she yelled as she called for Grace. Grace, who had likely been napping upstairs, came down casually. "Oh, Lily, welcome back. I missed you," she said, trying to hug her, but Lily pushed her away. Confused, Grace asked, "What's wrong?" Lily responded coldly, "Why is Sarah cooking alone, Mom, especially when she's so visibly pregnant?" Grace suddenly realized that Lily wasn't on her side. Her face turned pale. "Well, Sarah insisted on doing it," she stammered. Lily shot back, "No way. Do you know how hard it is to be on your feet all day in the late stages of pregnancy? You've been pregnant. You should know," she yelled furiously. Grace was shocked that her beloved daughter wasn't siding with her and slumped to the floor in defeat. Ignoring Grace, Lily went to the living room, picked up a newspaper, and hit Joey on the head with it, shouting, "Who got Sarah pregnant while you sit here playing on your phone? Aren't you ashamed?" Joey stammered, Joey was too stunned to take the situation seriously. Lily shouted, "Sarah's being mistreated by Mom, and you're oblivious. Are you that clueless?" She lunged at Joey, but William intervened, saying, "Lily, calm down. Calm down? Remember when I brought my husband to meet you? You told him to prioritize and take care of me after we got married. What about this mess? Your son is playing games while his pregnant wife is left alone." William couldn't say a word and just looked down, his face turning pale. Finally, Lily yelled, "All of you, cool your heads, you inhumans," and kicked William, Grace, and Joey out of the house. The room fell silent. Suddenly, Lily seemed to remember I was there. She turned around and said, "Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry for yelling. Did I scare the baby? Are you okay?" Her strong demeanor from moments before vanished. I found her sudden change in mood so funny that I couldn't help but laugh. "What's so funny, Sarah? I'm really concerned here," she said, looking worried. "Yeah, sorry, I get it, Lily. Thanks for sticking up for me." When I actually said thank you, tears started flowing. All the pent-up emotions I had been holding back came rushing out. For someone who had felt so alone, Lily's words and actions meant the world to me. My impression of her began to improve after this incident. Seeing me cry, Lily apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry for not noticing anything wrong before, for my mom's terrible behavior, and for my embarrassing brother." But I told her, "It's not you who should be apologizing, Grace, for what she did, and William and Joey for turning a blind eye. They're also in the wrong. I'm even at fault for not seeking help sooner." I assured Lily, "Don't worry, it's all good now," and we sat down to the dinner I had prepared. Afterward, Lily drove me home. A few hours later, a likely flustered Joey returned. He had completely changed his tune, saying, "Sarah, I'm really sorry about everything, it won't happen again." When I told Lily what had happened, she said, "That's good to hear, but if anything like this happens again, don't hesitate to divorce him." Grace and William later came to our home to formally apologize, saying, "We were wrong, we're really sorry." After that, there were no more calls to come to Joey's family home, and the harassment from Grace stopped. Joey also stopped suggesting we visit his family, allowing me to relax for the rest of my pregnancy. Thanks to Lily, we started staying in touch frequently. We even had casual phone calls, chatting about various things and feeling like real friends. Once things settled down after the baby was born, I planned to visit Joey's family again. When I told Lily, she said, "Let me know when you're going. We'll plan a family visit too." It felt reassuring to have her support. From the bottom of my heart, I was glad Lily was there. I thought everything would be okay now, with Grace and with Joey. I felt confident that we could manage, and I owed this newfound confidence to Lily. If Lily ever needed help, I wanted to be there for her too. That's how I went through each day now.
Your dad got transferred, so we're all moving to New York. Take care, you good-for-nothing daughter. From Mom. The note left on the living room table was filled with cruel words. It seems I have been left behind in this house. But there's always hope. Thanks to Grandpa, I was going to achieve great success. My name is Marion. I'm a 34-year-old constantly at the mercy of my 3-year-old daughter. Even after playing to her heart's content at lunchtime, she's always full of energy, running around naked every time she gets out of the shower. I spend my days chasing after this little princess. It's great that she's so lively, but my mid-30s body is deteriorating day by day, so please go easy on me, sweetie. Now I'm completely at the mercy of my child, but when I was little, I was at the mercy of the adults every day. I don't remember exactly when, but when I was small, a relative said this to me. Could this child have autism? At the time, I didn't really understand what that meant. But I remember my parents going pale and looking crestfallen, saying, "Maybe." Back then, it seemed my existence was a source of worry for my parents. Because compared to my brother Anthony, who was 3 years older, my development was slow. I was late to start talking, and even when I did start, I didn't speak properly. I was unassertive and shy around strangers. In response to this, people around me started saying things like, "Girls usually develop faster, don't they?" My daughter, who's the same age as her, is already picky about what clothes she wears every day, or maybe her slow development is because of poor parenting. I was born in a very rural area. My parents were classmates in high school. They returned to their hometown right after getting married, so there are a lot of their old classmates living in our neighborhood. I bet when they were young, they all fueled each other's competitive spirits through sports and academics. And then those young people also got married and had children, and now it was a parenting competition. They tried to one-up each other in every way, like whose baby started crawling at how many months, or whose child learned to read and write the alphabet early. I think it's an ugly fight to compete based on a child's rate of development, but that's just my opinion. My parents were no exception and joined this battle as soon as Anthony was born. Unlike me, my brother Anthony developed quickly. From a young age, he could look at a calendar and add or multiply adjacent numbers. With just little instruction, he became good at math, a smart kid. The people around us praised Anthony to the skies for his unchildlike excellence. To be honest, my parents were terrible at studying, and the neighbors who knew this made a big fuss about how an outstanding child was born to an average couple. My parents were very proud. Then I was born, and the reputation of my parents, who had been a couple with a brilliant son, plummeted. While their son was exceptionally talented, as if by a sudden mutation, their daughter was not. People started saying that the daughter must take after her parents, who were bad at studying and could only do sports when they were students. If people around us hadn't said unnecessary things, my parents might not have been so concerned about my slow development. But whether they meant well or not, people started lecturing my parents on parenting methods. They gave all sorts of advice that was meant to be helpful but was actually just meddling, like telling them to feed fish to a slow-developing child, or saying maybe they didn't talk to me enough. Honestly, a lot of the opinions and suggestions were off the mark. But my parents took their words at face value and made me eat fish, or drink strange supplements that were supposedly good for growth. It's not like doing those things would suddenly make me start speaking articulately or being able to do math. That's just common sense. But my parents started lamenting. Why is this child's development so slow when we're doing so much? Then came that comment from a relative. Could she have autism? My parents became completely convinced that she must, and even though they never took me to a doctor, they decided I was an autistic child. From then on, my parents treated me harshly. When I had just started first grade, this happened. Starting today, you're going to do this. Huh? Mom suddenly shoved a huge stack of workbooks at me. Apparently, they were Antony's, who was studying ahead and using 5th grade material under the guise of previewing. My parents seemed to think that no matter how bad my natural intelligence was, if they crammed studies down my throat, I could at least become a normal child. By forcing me to study, it seemed they were trying to raise me to be at least an average child, or maybe slightly above average. There's no way a child at the age when they just want to play could sit at a desk for boring studying. Of course I resisted, and was constantly leaving my desk without listening to my parents. But that behavior apparently made me seem even more autistic. My parents decided my actions were symptoms of autism, saying things like kids like this just can't sit still after all, or this is what happens when you can't communicate with people. Meanwhile, at Dad's urging, Antony took an online IQ test and got an astonishing score of 150. Although, it was just some online test. It wasn't a big deal. But my parents proudly declared, this child really is amazing. And so, the narrative in our house became the genius Antony and his autistic little sister, and all of my parents' expectations and affection were poured onto Antony. Antony was good at sports like our parents, and was one of the star players on his elementary school soccer team. But it was a small soccer team with only kids from our rural area, so being a star player rather than the actual ace didn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. He also did fine in his studies across the board, but, thinking about it now, I don't think he was really a genius with an IQ of 150 like they said. But once my parents got carried away, they couldn't see those little details. Instead, they both went around calling Antony a prodigy and bragging about him. The neighbors who initially praised him along with them started keeping their distance. My parents praised Antony so excessively that even I became convinced he was an amazing person. You know how kids see whatever adults say as absolute truth. On the other hand, Grandpa on Dad's side was calmly observing the situation. Grandpa lived nearby, but we almost never saw him face to face. At most, it was probably once or twice a year. Why, you ask? The reason is simple. Mom hated Grandpa. This was a little before I was labeled as autistic. At a family gathering, while Mom left me, young at that time, alone and went on and on bragging about Antony over drinks, Grandpa admonished her, saying, "Stop excessively praising the boy, or he'll struggle because of it when he's older. Focus on taking care of Marion too." In fact, Antony was overpraised and coddled by everyone around him, and it was starting to cause issues with his personality. He would say things looking down on other kids, and sometimes even make comments ridiculing adults. Once he told an older cousin, "That's why you can't get married," freezing the air. By the way, That cousin had just had her engagement called off after her fiancé's cheating came to light. He didn't seem to have any sense of cherishing me as his little sister either. He would call me weird nicknames and trip me when our parents weren't looking. That's what Anthony was like, unpleasant as he was, and our parents just kept calling him a prodigy without ever scolding him. They never said it to our faces, but I think to our relatives, our family was a real pain to deal with. That's exactly why Grandpa reprimanded Mom. I think he was totally right. But Mom didn't like what Grandpa said. She blew up at him, yelling, "Don't tell me how to raise my kids!" and making a big scene arguing with him in front of everyone. Dad took Mom's side, and our relatives just watched, not wanting to get involved. The only one who sided with Grandpa was Grandma, who passed away. With that background, my parents became estranged from my grandparents, but Grandpa still cherished us, grandkids. Grandpa was the only one who noticed how mean Anthony was to me and scolded him for it. But it's not like he was annoyed with Anthony like the other relatives. I think he tried to love us equally as his grandchildren. When our relatives and parents suspected I might be autistic, I remember Grandpa saying, "Even if that's the case, what's the problem? She's still an adorable child." As for me, he was probably worried about my home life. Once he wrote down his home phone number on a note and gave it to me, saying, "If you ever feel sad, call me anytime." But I never called that number. Somehow, I felt like calling Grandpa was something I had to hide from my parents, and it made me feel guilty. If only I had relied on Grandpa sooner. I think about it now. Once I was labeled as autistic, my family's treatment of me got worse. Being forced to do workbooks was nothing compared to the rest. Anthony, who was as mean as ever with no hint of affection for me, would flip over my meals under the guise of pranks, throw only the foods he hated onto my plate, and steal my favorites off my plate. He didn't even care if our parents saw anymore. And of course he didn't, because even when they saw Anthony bullying me, instead of scolding him, our parents would just say, "Ah, he's playing with his little sister," without care. Our parents never got angry at Anthony nor blamed him for anything. In fact, somehow I often ended up being the bad guy. If Anthony got a mere 80% on a test, they praised him to high heaven and bought him a new game console. For his birthday, they left me behind and celebrated at a fancy restaurant. I have no memory of ever being treated as more important than Anthony. Whether I got good grades, it was my birthday, or I got sick. No matter what, our parents doted on Anthony, so he got spoiled by that environment and stopped studying. His test scores kept dropping, and he started skipping school more to play at home. But our parents just optimistically said, "That boy's a genius, so as soon as he gets serious, he'll turn the situation around." Meanwhile, I studied desperately to surpass Anthony and kept getting better grades than him, but the autistic label was never removed. In the first place, I don't think they were even interested in me anymore. Apparently, our parents originally wanted brothers. They were so disappointed when they found out I was a girl. But still, since Anthony was a prodigy, they thought maybe his sister would be a genius too, but that expectation was shattered. On top of that, Dad was apparently put in charge of a big project that his promotion depended on, so the atmosphere at home was really unpleasant. Dad would come home stressed, drink and complain, sometimes blaming Mom for trivial things as if to vent. And Mom would get fed up listening to his gripes and be irritated, but couldn't express that frustration to Dad. While Dad vented his stress on Mom, it's not like Mom will take out her stress on us, kids. Her target was always pointed solely at me. She extremely coddled Anthony, and enjoyed seeing my face filled with envy and sadness. It was a nasty way to relieve stress. Moreover, Dad started venting his own stress the same way, and Anthony must have noticed our parents' behavior. He escalated his bullying as if he could do anything to me and get away with it. And so, I ended up in a punching bag position in the family. Mom started frequently tampering with my meals. Anthony's plate would be piled high with foods both he and I liked. Meanwhile, my plate had nothing but foods I hated. Then she'd snicker and say, "Eat up." Dad would take textbooks out of my backpack to make me forget things. Even if I thoroughly checked I had everything before leaving, somehow every few days a textbook would be removed at some point. In the first place, a child's wits are no match for an adult's pranks. Mom and Anthony were probably in on it too. Needless to say, my frequent forgetfulness made my teachers suspect I was autistic, too. As for Anthony, his harassment was escalating beyond bullying, like shoving me into intersections when the light was red or jabbing me with an umbrella. After starting middle school, Anthony went to school even less and often trashed my room during the day. I'd often notice my favorite books from the bookshelf ripped up. I was 12 at the time. Anthony was getting stronger and had a short temper. I was too scared to even think about talking back to him. I had no choice but to endure in silence. And then finally, a certain incident occurred. One Saturday morning. I slept in a little, and when I went downstairs to the living room, there was a note on the table. "Your dad got transferred, so we're all moving to New York. Take care, you good-for-nothing daughter. From Mom. Sorry, but don't hold it against us. Well, you're autistic, so maybe you won't even get what happened. From Dad. Bet you're frustrated being left behind? Sucks to be you." The last one wasn't signed, but I knew it was Anthony. It seemed my whole family had abandoned me. My mind went blank. Can a child even survive alone? With no money, what am I going to do for food from now on? I'm sure you all think my thought process at the time was pretty carefree for a kid. But that's just how kids think. Even with parents like that, they still fulfilled their financial responsibilities as parents. I had no experience living apart from adults. With my parents gone, I didn't even know what I should prioritize. I think the fact that meals and money were the first things to come to mind stemmed from human survival instincts. Not knowing what to do, I desperately pondered various things as a child, but couldn't find any answers. Before I knew it, I was hugging my knees and crying in the middle of the living room. I didn't know if I was crying because it hurt to be abandoned, or because my future anxiety was so great. I couldn't even tell what I was crying about anymore. My heart was a mess. After crying for a while, a memory from when I was little suddenly came back to me. "If you ever feel sad, call me anytime." The memo with Grandpa's phone number and his kind words. I had always felt guilty about my parents and was convinced I shouldn't rely on Grandpa, but now those parents were gone. Was it too late now? Recently, my parents stopped participating in family gatherings and even visiting for Christmas. So I hadn't seen Grandpa in years. He might hate me as a selfish grandchild who only reaches out when she's in trouble. I agonized over what to do, but couldn't think of any other adult to turn to. I hesitantly picked up the receiver and called Grandpa, clinging to it. Grandpa. I had been crying all day and couldn't hold back my tears even on the phone. My voice trembled from the first word. Then, "Marion? Are you crying? What's wrong?" Grandpa sounded flustered. Everyone moved away." "What? What do you mean?" "Dad got transferred." My incoherent conversation probably made no sense. But Grandpa still listened to me slowly. "So Marion, everyone left you behind?" "Yeah. They said I'm a good-for-nothing daughter because I'm autistic." I don't know what I'm going to do from now on. Don't worry, leave it to Grandpa. Grandpa. Anyway, I'm coming over there, so wait for me. Okay. Within 10 minutes of that exchange, Grandpa came to our house by car. He told me to stay at his house for the day, but when Grandpa contacted Dad and Mom to give them a piece of his mind, they said they didn't want to be involved with me anymore. Enraged by this, Grandpa declared he would take me in. From then on, I started living with Grandpa. 10 years passed. Wow! What a lovely home! I wanted to show my gratitude to Grandpa who raised me. To think the young female CEO everyone's talking about lives in such a wonderful mansion. I'm so envious. The one speaking cheerfully in front of me was a reporter I always saw on TV. Somehow, a TV crew had come to film the house where I lived with Grandpa. Why, you ask? Because I had become a bit of a celebrity. I was 22 at the time. My university had a program to support student startups, and when I tried starting a business with my friends, it was a huge success. A single brain training book became a massive hit, with events held not just in America, but worldwide, and games being released. The media featured me as the young female CEO who started a business in college. Eventually, they even came to my house saying they would take a peek into the female CEO's private life. By the way, after founding the company, I used the money I saved to buy a $10 million mansion way out in the countryside. Grandpa was supposed to be taking it easy after retirement with his pension and savings, but he went back to work to raise me. On top of that, he even put me through college. I'll say it as many times as it takes, but I'm not autistic. My parents just decided I was. As long as I put in the effort, I could keep up with everyone in my studies too, until elementary school, that is. Once I hit middle school, I was forced into sports by the school and had to do volunteer work, drastically reducing my study time. I quickly fell behind in class, and my grades were bad in most subjects on tests. I'm not good at sports either, so all I could do was try hard at studying. But once you fall behind, strange things happen. Even if I asked the teacher questions about the class, I had no clue what the explanations meant. It was the literal state of I don't even know what I don't understand. I started getting anxious, wondering if I really was autistic and had just been covering it up with effort until now. Grandpa noticed my struggle and helped me study. And he did it in quite unusual ways. Studying math concepts not in the textbooks, and foreign languages through movie subtitles. I read tons of books for English, and learned chemistry using everyday items for science. At first, I had doubts when Grandpa taught me methods and concepts totally different from what I heard in class, thinking, "Can I really learn this way?" But when I tried it, it made more sense and stuck in my head better than the lessons. And strangely, even though the approach was different, I properly arrived at the same answers as the methods taught in class. According to Grandpa, studying doesn't have to be limited to formulas and rule-based thinking. There are many ways to solve things, so pick one that clicks with you. Following that advice, I gained a flexible approach and was able to study well again, rapidly rising in the class rankings. And eventually, I was able to grow enough to advance to a prestigious university. I learned this later, but apparently Grandpa used to be a college professor. He said he left academia to take over the grocery store belonging to Grandma's family after they got married. But then, big grocery stores increased and they had to close down. He switched to being a businessman, a totally different field, which brings us to today. Dad hated studying and never retained what he was taught, but Grandpa told me teaching me was rewarding because I absorbed everything he taught so eagerly. Needless to say, those words of praise made me even more motivated to study. To me, Grandpa was like a superhero I admired. And to express my endless gratitude to Grandpa, I built this house. Actually, Grandpa has gotten old and uses a wheelchair these days. The house we lived in before had a lot of steps and made it hard for him to get in and out of bed. We relied on home care services during the day, but if the house was a bit easier to use, there were many things he wouldn't need help with. And the more Grandpa relied on others, the more I felt his body was weakening. Even with limited mobility, it's important to do some things for yourself. So I decided to build a completely barrier-free house. Luckily, land was plentiful out in the rural area. I had my pick of lots. I prepared a big yard for Grandpa, who loved going on walks, and built a small gym and pool so he could exercise even in a wheelchair. I was particularly picky about the bath and toilet, and had a low-height counter installed in the kitchen so Grandpa, whose hobby was cooking, could still cook while in his wheelchair. Well, after preparing this and that, it turned into a $10 million mansion, or rather, a bit of a leisure facility. The budget went way over, and what was supposed to be a cash purchase ended up being a loan, but if it helps Grandpa live longer, it's a small price to pay. When I talked about this on TV, a few days after the broadcast, my parents suddenly showed up at our house. I was planning to ignore them, but Grandpa said, "At least hear them out." It wasn't that he wanted me to be kind to my parents. He probably didn't want me, now in a leadership position as CEO, to act solely out of resentment. He told me to be a mature adult with some leeway, and I thought, he's right, so I decided to listen to my parents. "Why did you suddenly come to see me?" In response to my question, "We're sorry for everything until now. Please forgive us." My parents bowed their heads incoherently. Anthony, whom they supposedly doted on, was nowhere to be seen. "I don't hold a grudge anymore for the past, and I'm not interested either. It's a bother to be apologized to now for things that are over. Then, will you help us?" Dad looked at me with glistening eyes as he said that. I unintentionally let out a dumbfounded, Huh? Help you, with what?" I thought they just came to apologize, but I guess not. Well, of course. It's these people we're talking about. As Dad fell silent, Mom started speaking awkwardly. Actually, apparently, my parents had tried to send Anthony to a famous prep school after moving. But even after moving, Anthony rarely went to school, had bad grades and behavior, and even overslept on the day of an important test. He ended up enrolling in a high school said to be the worst in the state. My parents thought he could make up for it in college, but Anthony refused to go to college. In fact, by the time he started high school, he had become a complete truant and started rampaging at home. You see, Anthony himself had been called a prodigy by our parents and seemed to believe it too, but as he grew up, he realized he wasn't a genius after all. But my parents didn't notice and kept bragging to everyone about Anthony being a child prodigy even after moving. It was different from living in the countryside, where people would just keep their distance and leave it at that. Anthony stood out as that transfer student. His parents are kind of weird too, and seems to have been made a laughingstock. It's no wonder. In reality, Anthony wasn't a child prodigy, and even his talent for being good with numbers became average as he grew up. He was worse at studying than me, who was at least called autistic, and after his truancy increased, he got fat and wasn't great at sports either. And yet, if his parents excessively praise him as a genius, of course he'd be laughed at. And so Anthony went to school even less, developed a habit of skipping, and everything from his relationships to his studies fell apart. Eventually, he started rampaging to vent his stress. He overslept on an important test day and couldn't get into a top high school. He failed the second-round admissions too, and they made him go to night school, but he rarely attended and dropped out. After becoming an adult, he apparently started taking money from his parents' wallets without working properly and going out drinking. And the other day, Anthony got on his knees and apologized, saying he got a woman he met at a bar pregnant. This is developing too fast for me to keep up. So what? You want my help, basically to make me pay for the birth? As I looked on in astonishment, Dad held his head and said, "No, that's not it. There's more to this story. There's still more." While internally amazed at how deep this mess was, I listened to the rest of the story. Actually, the young lady who got pregnant is from a mafia family. You mean she's the daughter of the mafia? Seems so. Anthony was taken to their house by car, beaten, and came back. So what? Are they talking about him taking responsibility and marrying her? No, they're saying to break it off and just pay consolation money and child support. But from what I hear, it seems like a badger game on the lady's part. Hearing that, I went and understood. In all likelihood, the young lady doesn't love Anthony or anything. I don't even know if the pregnancy story is true. In any case, he got involved with a troublesome person. Please! We want you to help us out financially. It doesn't seem like not paying is an option. At this rate, we'll end up in the sea too. Dad turned pale as he said that. I didn't need to hear the rest to know what would happen to them in the sea. I'm aware we treated you horribly. But the fact that we're your parents hasn't changed, right? You must have at least a little feeling that we're important to you. Please, remember that feeling. Forgive us for back then and help us. Mom pleaded, spouting words that were outrageously brazen and shamelessly impudent. Does she not realize that those lines sound like an apology but aren't actually apologizing? Nah, I'm a good-for-nothing daughter. I don't want to show my good-for-nothing side even more by getting involved with my precious dad and mom. Even though Grandpa told me not to act out of resentment, I ended up retorting out of a grudge over being called a good-for-nothing daughter. Well, I think I can be forgiven for this much. There's no way you're good for nothing when you can build such a big house. You're our precious daughter, Marion. Saying that, Dad tried to grasp my hand. I swatted his hand away and said, "Well, of course. Parents who come to their daughter for money are way more good for nothing." Grandpa didn't seem to be scolding my attitude either. If anything, he seemed to be saying, "You tell M." He, too, appeared to be outraged at my all-too-selfish parents. Dad awkwardly lowered his eyes, and Mom showed an angry attitude, saying, "You said we didn't have to apologize, but you're not forgiving us at all. What do you want?" What do I want, you say? If I said I wanted an apology, would you apologize? Of course. If I wanted money, you'd give me money? Huh? I can take that to mean you'll do whatever I want, right? You feel that you're deeply sorry, right? That's why you came all the way here to apologize, right? Mom fell silent at my questions. Geez. I can see right through your scheme to apologize on the surface and cleverly get money from me. You're really shameless people. You've got some nerve saying that when you never intended to forgive us in the first place. Oh, I think if you sincerely apologized, I might consider helping you. What? Because you're my precious parents. When I smiled and said that, my parents looked at each other and nodded. We're truly sorry. Marion! I'm sorry. What are you sorry for? F for calling you a disgrace. You? Marion. Is calling me a disgrace the only thing you're sorry for? No, there are other things too. Like what? We were always mean to you, even though you have autism. Autism? Me, who went to college unlike Anthony. Did I get diagnosed at a hospital? Or are you doctors? We just decided it ourselves. That's right. And what do you mean by being mean, specifically? Making you eat only things you hate. Didn't you say that was a coincidence? So it was deliberate meanness after all, huh? We're sorry. I mean, you don't feel bad about moving and leaving me behind? Oh, of course we feel bad about that. Yeah, I get it. Okay, go home then. What? After going back and forth with me, my parents looked at me with dumbfounded expressions when I told them to go home. Didn't you hear me? Go home. About face, march straight to the front door. Aren't you going to help us? I thought about it, just like I said I would. Huh? I only thought about it. That should be enough. Instead of ignoring you and turning you away like normal, I took the time to listen to you. Be grateful. You tricked us. How rude. I never said I'd help you. I only thought I might consider it. I hadn't even decided if I would think about it, but I properly considered it because you apologized. I don't want to hear this and that from people like you who tried to deceive me by insisting your meanness was coincidental. My parents were stunned and couldn't argue back against my words. Taking advantage of that, I forcibly made them stand up and kicked them out the front door. Good luck struggling through life with your failed prodigy, Anthony. Goodbye. Wait. I slammed the front door shut. Thanks to the long hallway, I couldn't hear my parents' voices once I got away from the entrance. But their shadows were there for a long time, so they were probably calling for me at the door. But that's none of my business. And then I got word that Anthony had been arrested for assault. According to the victim, Anthony punched and kicked them, but, for some reason, Anthony was the one who took damage. Moreover, the so-called victim seems to be connected to the mafia. For a moment, I wondered if he had been set up by that young lady's family, but the truth remains unclear. My parents were threatened by the lady's family, and through their connections, ended up having to borrow money from a loan shark. They took out a huge loan and apparently paid that money to the family as consolation, but they couldn't pay back the debt. Not only that, but the amount ballooned for various reasons and now they're in debt hell. It seems there was talk of divorce between my parents, but since getting divorced wouldn't allow them to escape from the debt or the lady's family, they apparently chose to stay together. If you're going to be cornered by evil, having two people is probably more reassuring than being alone. Since I'm technically family, I hired a lawyer early on to protect myself from getting caught up in it somehow, so I avoided any issues. Anthony and my parents will probably be exploited for life. I pray nothing happens to me. Meanwhile, I continued to successfully expand my business, and currently have an events company in addition to my original one. There's high demand from overseas, and it looks like there's still plenty of room for growth. And, a few years ago, I married a half-Japanese, half-British man I met through work. Now, I happily live with my cute daughter with big eyes, my husband, and grandpa. Oh, right. One more happy thing to report. Looks like building a mansion was the right call after all. For a while, Grandpa was able to walk a tiny bit on his own. Now he's even older than before, so he can't walk anymore, but I feel like he's gotten younger compared to before, maybe because he has more chances to exercise. At the very least, Grandpa was more lively in both conversation and movement than a man I met at work recently who's the same age as him. It was an expensive purchase, but I'm glad I bought the mansion thinking it would be good for Grandpa. Live long and watching over us going forward. Grandpa. Anyone who can't score perfect on a test isn't my child. No matter how hard I tried or behaved well, My parents never acknowledged me. They adored only John, considered a genius, and looked at me coldly. The one who saved my heart was. "Then why don't you come to my place?" said Aunt Harper with a bright smile. "My name is Isabella. I'm a 32-year-old office worker. My life has been anything but smooth sailing. Let's start with my childhood. Dad was an ordinary office worker, and Mom worked part-time, so I was born into a very average family. I have an older brother, John, who is 3 years my senior. John was what you'd call a child prodigy. From a young age, he could easily understand complex books. He passed the entrance exam to a prestigious elementary school just for the heck of it. At that point, my parents were convinced of John's genius. They were nothing special, having been average students themselves. As for me, I was just an ordinary child. Not that I was poor in performance. I entered a regular elementary school and never had a bad test score. But next to John, who attended a prestigious school and scored perfect marks without even a tutor, I was nothing. John was always at the top of his class, and my parents were proud. They poured everything into him, considering the high tuition a future investment in John's success. As he reached higher grades, John got a tutor and focused even more on his studies. Expenses piled up, and I could no longer have the things I wanted. John lived up to our parents' expectations, becoming even more excellent. In middle school, he quickly became the top student. My parents doted on him even more. If John wanted something, they bought it for him right away. They also started spending on themselves more. Mom, dressing in brand names, said, "As the mother of a genius, I have to look right." And even started going to beauty salons. Naturally, our household funds dwindled. What to do was obvious. "Here's your food," Mom said, handing me a bag of bread. "Is this it?" It wasn't breakfast. It was night, dinner time. "We don't have money to waste on someone like you," Mom said, sitting down. Meanwhile, the other three had a normal meal with luxurious steaks. I watched in disbelief, eating my bland bread. I had always felt neglected compared to John, but once he entered middle school, it got worse. John is truly brilliant. A real genius. Compared to that Isabella is, Mom said, looking at me coldly. No matter how much they shunned me, as their child, I still wanted their love. So, I studied hard on my own. "Mom, look. I scored 92 on today's test." I proudly showed my test to Mom, which the teacher returned saying I was the best in class. But Mom just scowled as if annoyed. "Huh? 92? What's so great about that?" "What?" John frequently scored perfect marks in his advanced elementary school. But I worked hard. Being the best in class. I persisted, despite her cold response. Mom took the test I offered with a sigh. Relief was short-lived. "What's the point of something at this low level?" she screamed and tore up the test. Mom mercilessly threw the torn test into the trash can. "Don't show me such rubbish. It rots the eyes. Now go prepare dinner." Mom left the room after throwing those words at me, who was staring blankly at the trash can. By then, I had been made to do household chores. Dad was at work, and Mom was busy with John's lessons. Tears fell to the floor. Why? I tried so hard. I didn't mind having poor meals. Or not getting new clothes when the old ones got too small. Or even if they were old. I just wanted to be praised. To be told I did well and have my head patted. Everything I wanted was given only to John, and I could never have it. Despairing over this, I cried continuously. Becoming a child with hardly any expression. By the time I reached 6th grade, I feared being differentiated from John even more once I entered middle school. John, for his part, focused more on his studies for high school, barely talking to me. I'm excellent, unlike you. Influenced by our parents, John too began to give me cold glares. On a day when the loneliness was unbearable. Wondering if it would be just bread for dinner again, I sighed on my way home from school. Suddenly, "Hey!" someone called out, and when I turned around in surprise, I saw a familiar face. "Harper? It's been a while, Isabella. You've grown so much." Harper is my aunt, Dad's much younger sister. Apparently, she was the child my grandparents had longed for, saying they wanted another child because they were lonely as their son grew up. I heard giving birth in her 40s was tough. Harper, born when Dad was 21, is now 19. It's been a while since I last saw Harper, who lives with our grandparents far away. It's been a long time. What brings you here all of a sudden, Harper? Oh, I had some business over here. About this little one. It was then I noticed for the first time. Harper was holding a baby. Wow, a baby. So cute. What's with the child? It's my child. What? Turns out Harper had had a child at some point. Apparently, she's raising the child as a single mother. I was supposed to get married, but my fiancé passed away. Passed away? Yeah. His parents' home is around here, and I was visiting to report and show them the baby. I see. I frowned, realizing Harper had also been through a lot since we last met. But Harper smiled. Well, life has its ups and downs. Brightly. Aren't you sad, Harper? Of course, losing him was hard, but there's no use dwelling on it. I have to be strong for this child. Saying so, she laughed again and patted my back. It hurt, but somehow it was fun. Are Grandpa and Grandma well? They're fine. You should all come visit sometime. It's been years since you last came, hasn't it? Yeah. My face clouded over again at those words. Ever since they started focusing on John's education, I haven't gone out with my parents. Family trips were always the three of them without me. I was always left alone. I wonder how many years it's been since I had a fun conversation with relatives. Is something wrong? No, it's nothing. I shook my head and forced a smile, but Harper looked at me questioningly. In a hurry, I said, "Hey, look at this." I showed Harper the test that was returned to me today. Wow, you scored 95. That's amazing. You're so much better than me, Isabella. Surprised by the score, Harper patted my head. I can't remember the last time someone patted my head. I never had such a memory with my parents. Pleased, I beamed with joy. Go home and show it to your mom and dad. They'll praise you. Really? Yeah. I was on my way to see everyone since I'm here. Let's go together. Okay. Lately, going home had been depressing, but thanks to the cheerful Harper, I felt a bit better. Maybe today, Mom will praise me, maybe even pat my head. This is just trash. But my hopes were crushed. As usual, Mom crumpled my test and threw it into the trash can. Hey, that's not right. Seeing this, Harper was surprised and scolded my mom, but don't meddle in other families' parenting. Mom glared at Harper and continued. Forget about the test. What's up with you? Aren't you ashamed of being a mother without the father for your child around? Even as a grade schooler, I thought that was too much. Harper didn't choose to raise her child alone. After losing the person she loved, she's overcoming grief. My mom, who knows nothing, shouldn't say such things. Suddenly, the front door opened. Look, if it isn't Harper. Dad came home. And behind him was John. It seemed Dad was about to drive John to his extracurricular activities. It's been a while. You're home early. What about work? Shut up. It's none of your business. Times are tough. Are you okay with that? Jokingly said Harper. Dad grinned unpleasantly. I have John, a fine insurance policy. If he succeeds in the future, we'll be rich instantly. Our retirement is secure. When Dad said that, Harper looked at him uninterestedly. You should find a competent man and get married yourself. No thanks. I'll continue to love him. Plus, I have this child now. Why not just give up the child already? The moment Dad said something so awful casually, Harper's demeanor changed dramatically. What? She glared at Dad with a terrifying expression. Dad was clearly flustered by her intensity. You know, Dad. Feeling the tension, I tried to lighten the mood and spoke to Dad. What? As always, Dad responded gruffly. He hasn't smiled at me in a long time, and he hardly ever looks me in the eye anymore. I hesitantly offered my test. Today, I got 95 on a test. Dad glanced at the test and took it. I was hopeful he might praise me. But Dad was just like Mom. Not even worth looking, he said, throwing the test on the floor. And then, as if to finish it off, he stepped on it. A child who can't score perfect is no child of mine. The test was torn to shreds under his foot. Shocked at this, Mom added even more insult. He's right. You're not our child. Being with someone so untalented is annoying. If only I could get rid of you. Why? Why are they so cold? I'm for sure their child. Could they only the one who's excellent? So does that mean they didn't want me in the first place? I was crying in silence when Dad said, You're so annoying. Glaring at me. You're not cute at all. Mom spat out. Are you really my sister? Even John laughed and said so. I don't want to live in this house anymore. I blurted out. Then leave if you can live on your own. Mom sneered. A grade schooler like me couldn't possibly survive on my own. This hell was far from over. Thinking this, I felt more and more tears well up. It was when I felt like a hole had opened up at my feet. Suddenly, something warm was placed on my head. At that moment, I opened my eyes and looked up. There was Harper, with a bright and warm smile. Harper? I hear you. Then you should come to my place. What? Hey, you guys don't want Isabella, right? Harper asked Dad, standing before me, who was in shock. What? Well, yeah. Dad nodded. Then, I'll take in Isabella. Harper also nodded. Is that okay, Isabella? Harper peered into my confused face. Her eyes were shining, and I could tell she meant it, even as a child. At that moment, tears welled up in my eyes again. Yeah. I want to live with Harper. All right, it's decided. In front of my stunned parents and John, Harper smiled brightly and patted my head again. Packing up my few belongings, I left the house with Harper. You better not come back. Mom said. I won't let her come back. Harper said, sticking out her tongue. Her childishness made me laugh unintentionally. I was concerned about the baby. Is the baby okay? After all the noise, the baby had been quiet, and I asked worriedly. Harper peeked at the baby in her chest and said, He's been sleeping the whole time. This kid's going to be a big deal, she said with a laugh. And so, I was taken in by Harper. I thought we'd go to my grandparents' house, but it was different. There's no childcare center in the countryside. I moved to a place that's easier for raising kids, Harper said, leading me to the apartment where she currently lived. It's small, but bear with me. Don't worry, it's fine. Even though I lived in a detached house before, there was never a place for me there. This freedom now feels so much better. I don't mind transferring schools even right before graduation. I'm actually happy to go to a new place where no one knows my family situation. Since then, every day has been unbelievably fun. What? 90 again? Amazing, Isabella. Harper always praised me. Cooking didn't go well today? Don't worry about it. Everyone makes mistakes. She would cheer me up, asking if I was okay. Isabella, thank you for always helping around the house and taking care of the child. She expresses her gratitude to me. But you should prioritize yourself. You're still a child, and if you're in trouble, you should rely on adults. She always gives me a smile. Harper showed me more profound affection than my parents ever did. The grandparents I occasionally meet also spoil me. Thanks to them, I've completely recovered and grown into a fine person. And before I knew it, 20 years had passed. Now in my 30s, my parents are standing before me. I was contacted by my grandparents, who said my parents wanted to see me. What do they want now? Since being taken in by Harper until today, they've never cared or contacted me. Why did they want to see me all of a sudden? What is it? All of a sudden? I say coldly, but my parents give a sleazy smile. After 20 years, my parents have aged. And they seemed excessively worn out, with more wrinkles and white hair than one would expect. My mom, in her 60s, looks almost as old as my grandparents in their 80s. Don't be so cold. We have a lot to talk about. Shall we order something? We're in a cafe. In front of us is the coffee I ordered. For some reason, my parents only ordered water. I forgot my wallet today. Could you cover the coffee? Forgetting their wallet? How did they manage the transportation here? Their obvious lie makes me sigh. I'm not in the mood to eat. If you have something to say it quickly. I see. My parents look disappointed. Watching them warily, they give me a sleazy smile again. Isabella, won't you live with us? What? I heard you've become a lawyer. Dad says, his face lighting up. That's true. Yes, I became a lawyer after intense studying. Originally self-taught and scoring high grades, Harper hired a tutor for me, and soon my grades were at the top. I decided to become a lawyer, passed the difficult entrance exams for a prestigious university law department. And after overcoming various challenges, including graduate school and the bar exam, here I am. I knew you could do it. I'm proud to be your parent. You were excellent after all. Dad's words are infuriating. What are you talking about now? After all the times you called me useless? Everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes? Including oppressing me? That was for your own good. Unable to stand it, I ended up throwing water in Dad's face. I'm your dad. Why would you do that? Be thankful I didn't throw coffee. I spared you only to avoid trouble in the cafe, or else I would have. What did you say? Dad's demeanor changes completely. I've had enough. I thought we could have a calm and kind conversation, but there's no need for that with you. It seems Dad was trying to butter me up, but quickly showed his true colors. Sitting beside him was Mom, agreeing with him. That's right. You should support us. Why should I do that? It's a child's duty to take care of their parents. What? I frown deeply, and Dad's face turns even more red. What about John? The genius child you doted on? You said he'd take care of you when he succeeds. He's useless. Dad says dismissively at my words. He was fine until university, but then job hunting didn't go great for him and he shut himself in his room. That's tough. Apparently, the genius John was good at studying but failed elsewhere. He would pass written job interviews but was rejected at every face-to-face interview. Even the company that hired him, citing a lack of fit, let him go in less than 6 months. After failing to secure another job, he remained unemployed. Now, at 35, he's still jobless and holed up in his room. I can somewhat understand. Always pampered by our parents and following their instructions, John never learned to think for himself. He also never played with friends, so he likely couldn't build good interpersonal relationships. The inevitable outcome for someone who could only study. So, we 3 want you to live with us and support us. I refuse. What did you say? Didn't you hear? Let me say it again, I refuse. I said it louder the second time, and my parents became furious, their faces turning red. I worked hard to become a lawyer, but I never managed to score perfect on the test. What? Dad looked confused at what I was saying, so I continued. Dad, remember what you said? Oh yes, a child who can't score perfect is no child of mine. So, by that logic, I'm not your daughter. That's in the past. It's not just in the past. To me, it feels like it happened yesterday. I've suffered from those words for a very long time. Don't dismiss my suffering as something from the past. I spoke coldly, leaving my parents in despair. Besides, I already have a real family. What? Mom tilted her head at that moment. Sorry to keep you waiting, Isabella. A voice called from behind, and I turned around. Ryan, thank you for looking after the kids. It's no problem. Are you done talking? Yes, we're done. Let's go home. The man who appeared was a man of my age. I nodded with a smile and stood up. My parents hurriedly tried to stop me. Wait a minute. Who is this? To that, the man bowed his head. Nice to meet you. I'm Ryan, Isabella's husband. Husband? You're married? It seems my grandparents hadn't told my parents about this. Well, I had asked them not to. Of course I am. I'm 32. What about the wedding? We had one. You should have invited us, your parents. I did. We weren't invited. My mom insisted they weren't invited. But I repeated myself again. Yes, I did. I invited my dear and beloved mom. Confused by what I was saying, my parents looked to where I pointed. What? That's my mom. Mom? That's Harper? Dad shouted as he saw Harper, who had taken me in and raised me, smiling and waving. In her hand was a baby stroller. By the way, that's Harper's son, David. Beside Harper stood a fully grown David. And the young girl David is holding hands with is my child. What? And of course, the baby in the stroller is also mine. What? My parents' cries of shock didn't stop at the continuous revelations. I smiled at my astonished parents. Thank you, Dad, Mom, for abandoning me. Huh? To my stunned parents, I continued. Thank you for leaving me with Harper. Thanks to that, I received all the love I needed and grew up properly. I became a lawyer, met the person I love, and got married. All of this is because you abandoned me. What? Don't ever appear in front of me again. But, to my bewildered parents, I gave a cold smile. If you show up again, you know what will happen, right? Everything you did to me in the past, I'll sue you for. And if you do anything that I deem as harassment, I won't hesitate to sue you. Just remember what will happen if you appear before me. What will happen? Remember this well. With that, I grabbed the water in front of my mom and poured it over their heads. Enjoy your life with John, who's unemployed and holed up in his room. I waved and walked away, leaving my parents without a word. Later, through my grandparents and acquaintances, I learned that my parents sold the house and disappeared somewhere with John. Apparently, after retiring in their 50s due to the recession and receiving little severance pay, Dad quickly ran out of money and faced financial difficulties. Even when they told John to work, he would throw tantrums, making it impossible to reason with him. Even if they receive an old age pension in the future, the amount will be minimal. John's education consumed all their resources, and my parents ended up with no savings. They've reached the point where they're struggling even for daily meals and came crying to me for help. After being turned away by me, my parents sought financial assistance from my grandparents and other relatives, but being known as parents who abandoned their daughter, no one was willing to help them. Their last resort was to sell the old house, securing some money for their immediate living expenses. After that, no one knows where the three of them went. I feel sorry for John. He could have escaped from those parents if he really wanted to. His failure to do so might be his own responsibility. I'm willing to help him if he ever reaches out, but I don't know about my parents. As for me, I'm living happily surrounded by Ryan and our children. I try to shower all our children with equal love, regardless of who's more talented. Harper, who is aged but still looks young, watches over us with joy. I'll repay you for everything, Mom, I say, to which Harper responds with the same bright and cheerful smile she's always had. Isabella, you're nothing but perfect, my pride and joy, she says as she pats my head. Then, don't leave the TV on, and either turn off the lights in the living room or your room. Got it, got it. I'll make sure to save energy. I was leaving the house to go shopping far away. Whether I was out or at home, everyone in the family was committed to saving energy, such as not forgetting to turn off lights or setting the air conditioner to the right temperature. Today, as usual, I went out after reminding each other in the family. However, when I returned a few hours later, my beloved home had completely changed. If you love saving that much, I'll save energy for you. The malicious laughter of my sister-in-law echoed. She had sneaked in and turned off our home's main breaker, causing a major problem. The reason she did such a thing was, my name is Nicola. I'm 29 years old, living in my in-laws' house after marrying James, who is the same age as me. My mother-in-law has passed away, and my father-in-law, David, who has a chronic respiratory condition, was living alone in his house. Concerned about his health, James persuaded me to move in and live together while I continued to work. In the in-laws' house, there's also Amelia, James's unmarried sister, with whom I've had a hard time getting along. David is gentle and kind, much like James. On the other hand, Amelia has a rough temperament and is prone to emotional ups and downs. Being straightforward, I've had several clashes with her, and it's been somewhat of an effort to keep her in check since I'm a few years older. Aside from Amelia, it was a peaceful life. However, within half a year, David's illness worsened. He needed an oxygen concentrator to stay at home. Since both Amelia and I were working, we couldn't be there during the day to help David if needed. We should have arranged for him to move into a care facility for a more secure living environment, but David refused to leave the in-laws' house filled with memories of my mother-in-law. After consulting with James, we concluded that forcibly moving David would be detrimental to his health and cruel. So, we decided to hire a home caregiver, but problems arose here too. Not only did Amelia have a bad relationship with me, but she also disliked the idea of strangers entering her home, and started harassing the caregiver. Moreover, she hurled insults and made sarcastic comments out of our sight. She interfered with their work, and claimed that if they did not meet her expectations, they were unfit to care for David, repeatedly complaining to the agency. We were distressed, having several caregivers quit, but when we found out the cause, it was too late. The agency informed us they could no longer send anyone, leaving us abandoned. What do we do now? Other companies have turned us down too. We're probably blacklisted. Damn it! All because of Amelia. Known for causing trouble, we couldn't hope for any more home caregivers. We sighed and had no choice but to think of a solution. Amelia was inherently selfish and isolated from the family. James, as her brother, tried to correct her behavior, but it only led to fierce arguments, and he even told her to move out and live independently. However, Amelia was infuriated by being scolded in such a manner and started lashing out at me, easier to confront than James. "You're married now, so Nicola should take care of it. My brother can't quit his job because he's a man, but you're different." Hearing this, James would argue with Amelia again. This situation didn't allow David to focus on his recovery. I didn't like complying with Amelia's demands, but there was no choice. David, despite his illness, always tried to be cheerful and made efforts so I wouldn't feel out of place. Feeling indebted to David, I said, "I'll quit my job to take care of David. I'll start studying caregiving bit by bit. After all, David is family to me." Deciding to retire for caregiving, David and James expressed their gratitude with tears. Caregiving was completely new to me, and it was hard at first, but David always encouraged me gently. The only thing that didn't change was Amelia. She never moved out or helped with household chores or caregiving. On her days off, she would disappear to go out and have fun. Though I now have more time available, there's still the matter of caring for David and studying caregiving. James and I shared the household chores, but whenever there were imperfections, Amelia was quick to criticize. "Oh, wasn't it Nicola who decided to take on both caregiving and housework? You like doing everything by yourself, don't you?" If I retorted even slightly, she'd hit back with sarcasm. She harassed me this way, but James and the others would quickly find out and scold her repeatedly. Each time, she would play the victim, saying, "Dad's too kind to say anything. I'm just speaking up on his behalf." Of course, there was no improvement, and her interference only served to interrupt my work, quickly leading to stress accumulation. I'm truly grateful to the home caregivers who managed to smile through Amelia's persistent behavior. Not just me, but David and the others were also weary of Amelia's stubborn attitude. However, on a day James and I were discussing how to encourage her independence. "I've got a fiancé now, so I'm moving out. Bye, Dad. I'll come back to visit sometimes." With that, Amelia left the house quite abruptly. We were stunned, but with her departure, the atmosphere at home stabilized. Although there was talk of David moving to a care facility due to his age and condition, I was getting accustomed to caregiving, so we decided to continue with it at home. Amelia, now living with her fiancé's family, frequently returned to her childhood home. "There'll be leftovers from dinner tonight, right? Put them in a storage container. I'll take them home with me." It seemed she was relying on our leftovers to avoid preparing meals for her fiancé. Her selfish nature was intact, treating me like a housekeeper as before. "Amelia, don't order Nicola around without offering to help yourself." Yeah, sorry, Nicola." "All right then, hurry up with dinner, will you?" David's admonishments seemed to go unheard, merely brushed aside. To be honest, the amount of food I prepared hadn't changed since she left, so that wasn't really an issue. The real problem was the increased expenses on groceries and utilities. Despite moving out, Amelia stopped contributing financially but frequently returned to do as she pleased, leading to higher outlays. Moreover, she had no concept of saving energy or money. "Amelia, please turn off the lights in rooms you're not using. And about the shower, can I use it first if you're not going to?" Amelia was lounging on the couch, her back to the TV that was left on, engrossed in her mobile phone game. She had turned on all the lights in the bathroom and dressing area, intending to take a shower, but showed no signs of moving. Her lingering here was causing a delay for others. When asked to decide between gaming or showering, Amelia glared at me irritably. Fine, fine. I was about to go now. Can you not bother me? Always on about saving and conserving, are you dumb? It's not like it makes that much of a difference, being so stingy over small things. Amelia, watch your language. Yeah, sorry. David scolded, and she retorted. Finally, Amelia turned off the TV and headed to the bathroom. She complained, but at least she listened to what we said. Though being years into her career and engaged, her attitude remained that of a rebellious teenager. I had long stopped expecting her to act her age. Though it was not a concern, my relationship with Amelia remained tense, even after she left home. I thought saving and conserving could be a common ground for our family, but that proved difficult. One day, I was driving to a large shopping mall in the suburbs. I was tasked by David with running errands. David isn't unable to go out, but he needs to carry a portable oxygen tank when he does. For David, in his old age, carrying a heavy tank was bothersome, even if it had a carrier, and moreover it was all too visible with the nasal cannula. Tired of being pitted every time he met someone he knew, David preferred staying home. David asked for us to run errands for him many times, but James usually took care of these tasks when he was home. I was careful not to leave David alone, but this time our schedules didn't align, and I had to leave David behind. I was worried, but it's not like David couldn't manage on his own. He needed the tank because breathing didn't come easily, but he could still do a lot on his own. While it's important to save electricity, I asked him to use the air conditioning as needed, and with that, I headed out to shop. After completing the shopping without any issues, I returned to our home's parking lot a few hours later. It was late afternoon, although I had left in the late morning. Before entering the house, I checked my mobile phone. Sometimes James contacts me about dinner plans. But what I saw on the screen surprised me. There were countless missed calls. The callers were James, David, and the general hospital David attends. A cold sweat broke out on my back. When driving, I switched my phone to a mode where it wouldn't ring. Planning to return quickly today, I forgot to switch it back before shopping, and hadn't realized calls were coming in. A sense of foreboding washed over me. I tried to call James first, but the phone just rang multiple times without connecting. Growing more anxious, I tried David's number next, but there was no response there either. Finally, clinging to a sliver of hope, I called the hospital. A receptionist answered, and trying to suppress my panic, I inquired about David. He's currently admitted. We can't discuss details over the phone, so could you please come in? After being transferred through several departments, I was informed of this and became paralyzed. I quickly replied that I was on my way, hurriedly turned the car key, and restarted the engine. In the car, I was frantic. As if materializing my fears, the roads were congested. David had been fine when I left, waving me off as usual. Why would he suddenly need to be hospitalized? I deeply regretted leaving him alone. Upon arriving at the hospital, I was directed to David's room. Walking down the increasingly tense corridor, I quietly opened the door to find James already seated there. We looked at each other in surprise. However, James explained that he was at the hospital first, waiting for David's tests, which is why he couldn't answer the phone. I too had been driving, unable to respond to calls. Sorry for not answering the phone. No, it's okay. So, how is David doing? Prompted by him, I looked over at David sleeping in the bed. His complexion seemed a bit off, but the breathing sounds I was worried about seemed steady. It's okay, there's no issue with his condition. He's just admitted for some tests. Actually, hearing from James that David wasn't in danger finally put me at ease. So, why was David admitted? Just as I was about to ask this question, the door to the room burst open. It was Amelia, rushing in. Her eyes were filled with terror, ignoring us and rushing straight to David's bedside. Seeing him lying there, she screamed loudly. "Ah! What has happened to Dad?" James hurried to calm her down. But her panicked cries continued to echo in the room. "Please, calm down." James tried to pull her away from the bed. Her voice, initially fearful, gradually quieted down, but then she suddenly turned to me, glaring and shouting with raw emotion. "You were with him! What happened?" Her accusations struck me, leaving me speechless. James intervened to calm things down, but her anger was still directed at me. Confused, I was caught in a strange sensation. David needed oxygen, but such a sudden hospitalization seemed unlikely. "Wait. Can't we talk about this calmly?" James turned back to us with a quiet tone, starting to explain what he knew. David was transported here because the oxygen concentrator's power was cut off. After I left, David was sleeping in his room when the power went off. He woke up feeling suffocated and tried to turn the machine back on, but it wouldn't work, and he couldn't reach me or James. David connected himself to a portable tank to catch his breath, but was anxious about waiting alone without knowing when we would return. David, struggling with a headache, decided to go to the hospital, but since we usually drove, he had no way to get there. He then attempted to call a taxi, but his hands trembled so much that even making a call became difficult. So, David went to ask a neighbor to call a taxi for him. Upon stepping outside, the neighbor screamed at the sight of David. They took him to the living room, laid him down, and applied copious amounts of ice while calling an ambulance. It was then that David realized he was suffering from heat stroke. Thanks to timely treatment at the hospital, his condition stabilized and he was safe. According to what James heard from the doctor, David, perhaps due to his age, had a diminished ability to feel heat, and he didn't realize that his trembling hands and headache were symptoms of heat stroke, rather than old age. He also had convulsions, so immediate treatment and hospitalization were necessary. Hearing James's explanation, I couldn't help but express my doubts. The power for the device not coming on. It's hard to believe the plug could have come loose. We installed it in a place where it couldn't be accidentally unplugged, right? James frowned, deep in thought. Amelia remained silent. However, her face was visibly pale. That's correct. It couldn't have come unplugged on its own. I went back to check, and indeed, the plug was still in. Then how? I was even more confused by James's words. He had returned home to prepare for the hospital stay. And noticed the power was off, but the plug was still connected. He then looked sternly at Amelia. Her pallor suggested she was hiding something, but it was unclear why James was so angry. Suddenly, James raised his voice at Amelia. "You turned off the breaker, didn't you? Say something." As James's voice echoed in the room, Amelia started trembling. Struggling to speak, but only managing to utter incoherent sounds. Then James took something out of his pocket. The hospital had tried to contact me, James, and Amelia several times, but James was the first to connect. Returning home to prepare, James immediately felt something was off upon entering. He was greeted by an unbelievable heat wave. Noticing the hall light didn't work, James checked around the house and found all appliances stopped. Rushing to the breaker, he found it switched to OFF, as he suspected. James was stunned and suspicious. Why would this happen? There was no report of lightning or any incident that could cause the breaker to trip. Other homes were unaffected, with no reports of power outages. However, James remembered something important. Our home had several security cameras installed. This was before I married James, insisted by David after a burglary, for his wife's peace of mind. Despite our commitment to saving, the cameras were kept for our safety. The footage before the power outage should be available. Rushing to restore power, James checked the records. I've got the footage here. I wanted to show both of you, so I transferred it. James took out his mobile phone in the hospital room and showed us the transferred footage. The first scene was our familiar home entrance. Some time after I left, Amelia made her appearance. It was the first time I knew she had come to the house, and I couldn't help but glance at her next to me. She used her own key to open the front door and enter. The usual noise was absent. Instead, she looked around, as if searching for something. It was almost as if she was checking to see if I wasn't there. James started operating his mobile phone, now switching to the footage from a camera inside the entrance. Our home's circuit breaker is located near the ceiling of the shoe cabinet. Amelia climbed onto the chair placed for sitting while wearing shoes and opened the cover of the breaker.
"What are you doing?"
Even though I knew what was happening, I couldn't suppress such a scream. The camera had a voice recognition system that starts recording when it detects sound, so it recorded not just the sounds of Amelia moving but also her chilling whispers. "This is the breaker, right? If the fridge stops, that penny pincher will calm down a bit, won't she?" A maliciously laughing voice echoed in the quiet, silent hospital room. "Look, I'm saving energy, just like you love to do." After she turned off the breaker, the footage ended. We were at a loss for words, standing frozen in place. Turning off the breaker would, of course, stop the power supply throughout the house. For the several hours until James noticed, the contents of the fridge must have turned into a disaster, just as she planned. From the way she rushed into the hospital room, it seemed she hadn't realized her actions could endanger David's life, but to punish me, it was too cruel. Yet, she took an action I could never have imagined. "I did it because you're always nagging about saving energy." She started to raise her voice in an attempt to justify herself, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't know Dad was home. I thought you went out together. It's your fault for leaving him behind. I didn't think this would happen," she repeated. Contrary to her tearful self-defense, my heart was ablaze with anger. "Sneaking in like a thief and turning off the breaker, it's miraculous he survived. If something had happened to David..." I couldn't help but blame Amelia, but she raised her voice even louder to blame me. "But it's your fault. You shouldn't have left Dad. It's all because of you." Her accusation pierced my heart. Indeed, I shouldn't have left David behind. Leaving him behind, saying that going far would be a burden, was perhaps my mistake. As the hospital room filled with tension, suddenly it was shattered. "Quiet down." David, who we thought had been asleep, rebuked her. He couldn't raise his voice much due to his illness. Being naturally gentle, we were all shocked. All three of us turned our gazes to him. "Do you understand what you've done? Causing trouble for everyone, almost killing your father. Nicola isn't to blame." David's eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. His tone was much stricter than his usual gentle demeanor. Woken up by Amelia's screaming and the commotion, he had woken up and heard everything, including the surveillance camera footage. "If you're going to keep making noise, leave. And don't ever come back to the house." After being scolded, Amelia turned pale, frozen in place, but then she suddenly started crying. And rather loudly, which was very annoying. Amelia was apologizing to David, but James said, "Leave, you're a nuisance." And she was driven out of the hospital room. David was discharged just a few days later. When James and I went to pick him up from the hospital, he greeted us with a relieved smile, apparently feeling better. But upon returning home, Amelia was waiting at the entrance. She hadn't shown herself to us since that incident. We were expecting an apology, but what came out of her mouth were the same words as before. "It's your fault. Everything that happened to Dad is all because of you." David and James could only wear expressions of utter disbelief. David stepped forward towards Amelia, unwilling to admit fault and still trying to push the blame onto me. "Be grateful we're not taking you to the police just because you're family. Your actions are absolutely unforgivable." David's cold voice, unchanged even outside the hospital room, made her fall silent. But David didn't stop there. He had come to despise her from the bottom of his heart. "I'm disowning you. I can't believe you still don't understand the seriousness of what you've done. As I said at the hospital, never come to our house again." With those harsh words, he brushed past Amelia and entered the house. She probably never imagined being disowned by her father. She stood there, dumbfounded. We sided with David's anger, deciding to support him. So, we left her outside and went back into the house. Afterward, Amelia sent numerous apologies. But David ignored them all. Having been caused so much trouble, we had no sympathy for her and maintained our stance. David had been asked to financially support Amelia's wedding and honeymoon, but he refused all requests and firmly stated he would not attend the wedding. One day, I was ambushed outside our house by her. She desperately apologized and pleaded with me to persuade David, but I had already decided not to forgive her. Knowing ignoring her would only make her more persistent, I quietly listened to everything Amelia had to say, then left her there and walked away. This series of events eventually became known to Amelia's fiancé. David had declined attending the wedding for safety reasons, but the fiancé, puzzled by this, reached out to David. It turned out she had twisted the story to suit herself, but upon hearing about the breaker incident that led to David's emergency transport, the fiancé apologized to David in a panicked frenzy. The fiancé was sensible, unlike Amelia. Calling her actions akin to attempted murder, their marriage was ultimately called off. The lease for their new home was cancelled before they could move in. Amelia was kicked out of the fiancé's house, but she had already quit her job in anticipation of getting married. Thanks to expenses on beauty treatments and salons in preparation for the wedding, her savings were nearly gone. And with the wedding venue already booked for the imminent event, she had to cover half of the cancellation fees. She ended up struggling with debt due to her own actions, but thankfully didn't show up at our place anymore. Meanwhile, the three of us have been living peacefully. Perhaps because we're no longer being disturbed and hurt by Amelia, David's condition has improved more than before. While we can't be careless because of his age, it seems we won't need to consider nursing home admission for a while. In fact, we're even planning a trip. "Don't talk to me, I'm tired." Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. "Wait." I tried to call out, but no voice came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I've been putting up with him for so long now. Maybe it's partly my fault. Maybe Christopher is just busy with work, I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I resorted to the last option. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. I decided to get a divorce once and for all. It was then that I noticed a new message on Christopher's mobile phone on the table. I was shocked when I saw it without thinking. "What the?" Seeing that I vowed to myself. I had no choice but to brace myself. I'm going to show that man. I am Zoe, 26 years old. I recently married Christopher after dating him for about 3 years and moved out of my home. It's odd to say it myself, but being the youngest, I was doted on. So, on the day I left, my whole family cried. "Be happy, Zoe. Christopher, please take care of Zoe." "Of course, sir." Despite Dad's statement that seemed to pressure, Christopher answered with a relaxed smile. "I'm really counting on you." There are 2 reasons why Dad emphasized this so much. The first reason is that Christopher has a history of divorce. Moreover, he ended his first marriage in just 6 months. The reason for the divorce was supposedly due to personality differences, but the brevity of the marriage was concerning. Dad had consented to the marriage, but had always been worried about that. "I understand your feelings all too well as a man. So, today, I thought I'd make a clear statement." Christopher declared loudly and pulled out something he had brought. It was, astonishingly, a filled-out divorce application form. Though it may seem an aberrant act by common standards, Christopher said earnestly and handed something to Dad. "If I can't make Zoe happy, please submit this." Continuing, Christopher added to the bewildered Dad. "I apologize for causing worry to you all because of my divorce history. So, this is like an insurance. I won't need to use this. I'm determined to make her happy. Please accept it." Dad was perplexed, but took Christopher's earnestness to heart. He silently nodded and accepted it. This was the second reason for Dad's worry. Christopher was quite the charmer and an eccentric man. "Understood. I'll trust you." Dad nodded with a complicated expression. Our married life began like this. Not to say it was a dream come true, but I was looking forward to our marriage. However, what awaited me, full of anticipation, was an unexpected hell. After quitting my job and becoming a housewife, I woke up earlier than Christopher every day, prepared everything, and saw him off with a smile. "Have a good day. Do your best." Before we were married, Christopher would respond with a hug and a kiss. "I'm off. I'll do my best for you." He would always sew and leave the house, waving his hand. But after marriage, Christopher changed. Yeah. With just that single word, Christopher would leave the house. His aloofness was so surprising that at first, I wondered if he was feeling unwell. Furthermore, when he returned home, Christopher was strange. "Welcome home. Would you like dinner? Or would you like to take a bath?" I greeted him with the usual line. To that, Christopher languidly replied, "Bath. Just bath? Is something wrong?" Confused, I couldn't help but ask, but Christopher just looked at me coldly for a moment and replied, "Nothing." Thinking back, maybe getting any response was better than nothing. Now, a week into our marriage, Christopher has stopped responding altogether. When he's in a good mood, he might still react with a word or a gesture, but the problem is when he is in a bad mood. When Christopher is in a bad mood, he completely ignores me. "Hey, don't ignore me. You've been like this ever since we got married. Did I do something wrong?" Christopher didn't reply. "Please say something." When I started to feel down and tears were about to fall, Christopher sighed heavily upon seeing this. "You think crying solves everything, don't you? Must be nice being a woman, it's so easy." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't stop the tears. I silently looked down. The only thing I could do was hide my tears. Actually, my dad runs a company. I am what you would call a president's daughter. Before getting married, I worked as an office clerk at my dad's company. That's where I met Christopher. I, an office clerk, often handled the sales slips of Christopher, who was in sales. We gradually became close, and he asked me out. He seemed very surprised to learn I was the president's daughter, but that made me happy. He saw me not as the president's daughter, but for who I am personally. Back then, Christopher who would earnestly listen to my stories and respond with a smile. But that Christopher is long gone now. I wish I hadn't married him. Is there some reason for this? Did I do something wrong? I thought about it, but couldn't find any reason. The only thing that seemed to have caused Christopher to change so drastically was the marriage itself. Getting married, some people change due to relaxation or familiarity. I think that happens to some extent. But in Christopher's case, it was more than just to some extent. If I had known he was like this before marriage, I would never have married him. I took out a sheet of paper from a file I had kept in my desk. It was the divorce application form that Christopher had given me that day. If I submit this to the city hall, would the old Christopher come back? I spent days looking at the divorce application form and then putting it back. One day, when I returned from shopping, Christopher was standing in the doorway with a scary look on his face, waiting for me. It was the middle of a weekday. Why was he at home? Wondering, I tried to smile and spoke. "Welcome home." Christopher slammed the table. Startled by the noise, I stumbled and fell. Christopher took a few steps closer, looked down at me coldly, and showed me the paper he was holding. "Do you know what this is?" In fear, I nodded. What Christopher held was the filled-out divorce application form. It was supposed to be always in the drawer, but why? Then I realized. Maybe I had looked at it before shopping, as usual, and forgot to put it back. "Do you want to divorce me?" Well, I couldn't say it wasn't true. Life with Christopher recently has been mentally exhausting. If this kind of life continues, I am considering divorce. "It's because you've been strange since we got married. Lately, you ignore everything I say, and I can't call this happiness. So it's my fault." Then he stared at the divorce application form. "I'm fine with divorcing." "What?" "But remember, in this case, Zoe, you're the one at fault. The problem lies with you, failing to support your husband as a wife." Christopher waved the divorce application form. "But Christopher, you said to Dad. He promised he would make me happy." Before I could finish, Christopher seemed to realize something and snorted. "Promise to make you happy, huh? A typical princess way of thinking. How could you? You and your family are too naive. Clearly, our worlds are too different. It might be good for you to experience poverty for once." I didn't understand what Christopher meant, but from that day on, he stopped giving me any living expenses. Moreover, he even took away my credit card and debit cards. Originally, I quit my job because Christopher wanted me to. "I want you to greet me cheerfully when I come home," Christopher said, and I became a housewife to fulfill his request. Now, as a housewife, I have no income. It seems Christopher was paying for the rent and utility bills, but the biggest problem was food. "The food at home is almost gone. Please, I need living expenses." Although it was humiliating, I begged Christopher. Christopher seemed pleased and said something outrageous. "Don't worry. I'll eat out." "What? Wait a minute." No matter how much I pleaded, he completely ignored me, and I ended up not getting any living expenses. Christopher continued to come home late night after night. I managed to survive on the remaining food and instant meals, but I had reached my limit. On a rare day when Christopher came home on time, I finally voiced the thoughts that had been haunting me. "You don't give me any money, and you don't talk to me. This isn't happiness, this isn't even a marriage. If this life continues, if you don't intend to change, please, let's get a divorce." I hoped that this might make Christopher change, even a little. If he didn't change at all, then I would give up. It was my last resort. I waited anxiously for Christopher's response. Christopher looked down and scratched his head, then spoke in a low voice. "Don't talk to me, I'm tired." Christopher coldly averted his eyes, pushed my shoulder as I stood in front of him, and walked away to the changing room. "Wait." I tried to call out, but no sound came out. As Christopher's indifferent back disappeared, I felt dizzy and involuntarily knelt down. I can't believe this. He didn't even change a single expression on his face. I had endured so much. Christopher had changed his attitude completely after marriage, and I wondered if it was partly my fault. Maybe it's because he's busy with work. I tried to convince myself, looking for reasons to justify his behavior. I believed that if I changed, Christopher would return to his old self. I thought I had done everything possible for that. But still, Christopher didn't change. That's why I had to take the final step. I had resolved that this would truly be the end. There was no sign of disturbance on Christopher's face. Normally, wouldn't someone panic a little if their spouse they loved asked for a divorce? Instead, Christopher looked terribly bothered. Seeing that face made it clear. Christopher no longer loved me. "Let's get a divorce, once and for all. There's no point in continuing this marriage. I'm hungry, and I might as well pack my bags right now." I slowly stood up and headed towards the drawer where the divorce application form was kept. Then, I noticed the screen of Christopher's mobile phone on the table lighting up. It seemed like a message had arrived. I intended just to glance at it, but what I saw shocked me. What the? Displayed on the mobile phone was a screen full of heart emojis. I impulsively picked up the mobile phone to check the message. Thank you for yesterday. Let's spend another night together soon. The sender of the message was someone named Lily. I tried to remember, but I had no recollection of anyone named Lily. I checked towards the changing room. There was still no sign of Christopher coming up. Looking back at the mobile phone, it was carelessly left unlocked. I sighed. The more I looked, the more evidence of infidelity I found. The message exchanges alone confirmed the intimacy with Lily, but there were even pictures of them snuggling close together. Leaving such conclusive evidence without even locking the phone, how careless could one be? Or did he think it was okay to be found? I'm being underestimated. I became oddly calm. I recorded the mobile phone screen with my phone, heaping evidence of everything that might be relevant. After finishing, I placed the mobile phone back on the table, and Christopher came out of the bath. Without saying a word, and without any follow-up to earlier, Christopher retreated to his room. It was simple. Christopher was cheating. That's why he had been so distant. In my sorrow, I understood. From the next day, I started working towards divorcing Christopher. There was no more hesitation or confusion. All that was left was anger at being betrayed. First, I needed to find out who Lily was. Hiring a professional would be more reliable, so I decided to hire a detective. At the same time, I started my own investigation. Christopher's recent late work hours and weekend work seemed suspicious if he was cheating. I could quickly verify the facts with Dad's help. Though it pained me to worry him, there was no other choice. I needed to do what needed to be done. I'll show him hell. The hardest part during the divorce preparations was having to see Christopher's face even in such times. The face I once found dear now only brought up the desire to slap him. Maybe my disdain showed. You're looking uglier than usual. Are you sick or something? Christopher initiated a conversation. Couldn't he have found something nicer to say? I answered with a smile. I'm fine. Once the preparations were done, there would be no need to stay here any longer. Taking advantage of the weekend when Christopher went to work as usual, I decided to take action. I told everything to Dad, who was furious and immediately arranged a place for me to move. I had initially thought of returning to my parents' house, but my sister had just returned there for her childbirth. Considering the circumstances, staying at my parents' house was not an option. So, Dad arranged a mansion worth $1 million. It belonged to a relative who was about to put it up for sale. They weren't in a hurry to sell, so they let me stay there. Dad also gave me enough money for my immediate needs, so my life was back to normal. In fact, it became more comfortable. Where the hell are you now? The call from Christopher, full of surprise, came 3 days after I left the house. Who knows? So I replied, and Christopher's voice grew tense. And the divorce papers are missing, don't tell me you. This surprised me too. He noticed the missing divorce papers quite quickly. Did he start searching frantically after realizing I was gone? This was the first time I've seen Christopher so flustered. Even through the phone, I could picture his panic, which made me laugh a little. What about it? I've submitted them to the office. When I answered calmly, Christopher made a strange noise. What? Why? You said, remember? If you can't make me happy, I should submit them. You even declared it with a smug face. That was just to reassure Zoe's parents. So he was panicking because I actually submitted the divorce papers, which he intended only as a performance? And I told you before. If this kind of life continues, I want a divorce. That time I was just tired. I talked to Dad, and he said your department isn't that busy. I cut off Christopher's attempt to blame his fatigue. He always claimed to be busy, returning home late and frequently worked on weekends. I never doubted him, just worried. But I should have questioned it. Was Christopher really going to work, or should I have investigated? I found it odd, you know? I asked Dad when I saw him yesterday. He was puzzled too. Overtime is one thing, but weekend work should only happen a few times a year, so he was also wondering why. No, well... Hey, you weren't working, were you? What were you so busy with every week? Where were you going? Christopher didn't respond. I knew it. He couldn't answer. In his mind, Christopher was probably scrambling for an excuse. He's smart and smooth-talking. But this time, nothing he said would matter. Because I already knew everything. Lily, right? She's quite the cutie. I could tell Christopher gasped over the phone. How did you? Detectives are quite efficient. They secured photos and videos as evidence right away. I looked over the photos and report in my hand, reading aloud. Lily. A 22-year-old office worker in the accounting department. Oh, more than a decade younger than you. I'm 8 years younger too. Christopher seems to like younger women. Lives in an apartment near the downtown area, 2nd floor. Wow, so you've been visiting her every week. Zoe, wait, Lily is... Christopher is quite the needy one. He used to cling to me a lot before we got married. Seeing Christopher, 8 years older, acting so needy made me happy back then, but now the mere thought disgusts me. By the way, conversations with Lily are also safely recorded as evidence. Wait until I divorce my wife, what a classic line from a married man. Couldn't you come up with something better? The detective also suggested that Christopher looked down on me quite a bit. Your wife will find out, you know. It doesn't matter, she's on her way down anyway. That's what he said. I was utterly underestimated. Wait, Zoe. You're misunderstanding something. Can we meet just once? I suppose. I was thinking we should meet one last time. The next night, we agreed to meet, with Lily accompanying him. The venue was the mansion I was renting. When Christopher arrived at the designated time, he seemed uneasy. What's with this mansion? It's a place I'm renting. It's worth $1 million. $1 million? Christopher's voice cracked, and Dad watched him intently. So, your dad is here too? Christopher's eyes darted nervously. Well, yes. It's only fair since you brought Lily. Plus, this affair involves company employees. It's best to have Dad here, as he's the company's head. I suppose you're right. Christopher said with a forced smile. Dad glared at Christopher the entire time. Lily, with her bright hair and petite frame, looked cute, but had a surprisingly strong personality. As soon as the discussion began, glaring at me, and she opened her mouth. I'm a victim too. I had no idea Christopher was married. And now, I'm dragged here, it's unpleasant. Lily's assertiveness surprised me. But Christopher looked even more shocked. What? You were the one pushing me to leave my wife. That was just a joke. Christopher turned red with anger at Lily's evasion. Why did I even bother to have a relationship with such a woman? I could hear him mutter. Lily snapped back, and they started arguing right in front of us. To think I'd be serious about an old man like you. Excuse me? Who do you think caused all this? You said our company was doomed. That's why I decided to end it with Zoe. Wait, what? Apparently, right after we got married, Lily had whispered to Christopher. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. As a husband, you'll end up suffering too. Initially, Christopher didn't take her seriously, but Lily was persuasive, and he began to believe her. Seeing me act considerately towards him, he concluded the company must indeed be in trouble. I thought you were sweet-talking me to saddle me with debts. What? I thought you were just tired. I found it odd that everyone was being overly kind to me. Perhaps his boss and co-workers were being cautious because he married the president's daughter. But the idea that Dad's company was in crisis was a complete misunderstanding. Dad, being present during this conversation, also confirmed. Thanks to everyone, we're actually thriving. There's absolutely no chance of going under anytime soon. At Dad's words, Christopher fell to his knees. I had a bad feeling, so what was all this for? Ultimately, Christopher was just caught in Lily's scheme. Lily was intrigued by Christopher, who had married the president's daughter, and approached him out of curiosity. Initially ignored, she lied to catch his attention. The company is finished. Being married to the president's daughter puts you at risk too. Apparently, this lie worked on Christopher. Fearing a joint downfall with us, Christopher probably started ignoring me, hoping for an amicable divorce. I was just deceived, Zoe, you understand, right? Christopher approached me with a strained face. Well, perhaps you were merely deceived. Yes, I was, so let's not talk about divorce. But you know, this has made things very clear to me. Christopher looked up at me, puzzled. Essentially, this man would be the first to flee if we were ever in the same predicament. And this time, he even cheated without consulting me about how business was going first. Moreover, instead of proposing divorce directly, he manipulated things so that it would seem like the suggestion came from me, which is the height of cowardice. You know the vows, in sickness and in health. You would probably abandon me without hesitation if I fell ill. No, I wouldn't do that, Zoe, please listen. There's nothing left to discuss. I just wanted to know why you were ignoring me. All this time, I thought I had done something wrong. Let's handle the rest through our lawyers. Lawyers? Christopher's face went pale. Having an affair while married, did you think there wouldn't be any consequences? I'll make sure both you, Lily, and you, Christopher, are properly charged for the divorce proceedings. Wait. If I can't even stay at the company, how can I afford the shorty for a divorce trial? Christopher's voice trembled, and almost simultaneously, Lily also raised a panicked shout. No way, that's ridiculous. It was all just a joke, and it's his fault for falling for it. The two of them blamed each other, each insisting they were not at fault. The sight of that was so ugly, it made me sick. Had I endured a month of agony for these people? How pathetic. To the arguing pair, I said with a smile. Now I understand. You two are perfect for each other. So alike. I made the right decision stepping back. Well, we won't be seeing each other again. Goodbye. Wait, Zoe! Dad put his arm around my shoulder protectively. We left them behind. Christopher kept calling my name from behind, but I ignored him thoroughly. Later, I received the surety for the divorce proceedings from both Christopher and Lily. Christopher, apparently having a decent amount of savings, paid it in one lump sum. Lily's payment came from her parents, also in a lump sum. And as for their places at the company, we'll have to fire him. I tried to calm Dad, who was furious, while pondering what to do, but eventually, the two of them couldn't stand the scrutiny and resigned on their own. I was relieved, but Dad was the one who was most relieved and happy about it. Christopher seemed to have been crying till the end because he couldn't let go of the past. If only he hadn't done what he did. Perhaps what Christopher really regretted was losing the title of being the president's son-in-law. The thought of never having to see his face again felt refreshing. Returning home as a divorcee, my family welcomed me warmly. I also returned to my job as an office clerk. I thought I might be treated delicately, but to my surprise, everyone welcomed me back warmly. Since it's over, I was always wondering why someone like you chose him. Someone said so, patting my back, which made me burst into laughter. If I ever get married again, I'll make sure to avoid someone who's only good on the outside. I'm sorry, but you can't make a withdrawal. What? It seems there's only about $1 in your bank account. Wait, there's got to be a mistake. How did it come to this? I was trying to withdraw money from my bank account for my son, Mike's tuition fees. Then I received a call from the credit card company. Hello? We're seeing a charge of $30,000 here.
What?
I exclaimed louder than before. Other customers in the vicinity turned to look, wondering what was going on.
Ma'am? Can you give me a moment? I need to check something.
I had a suspicion. After hanging up, I called someone else.
Did you use my credit card?
Yeah, about that. My parents wanted a new car, so I bought it for them in full. My husband Dylan, unapologetically laughing over the phone. All the savings for Mike's education.
Do you even realize what that money was for?
Come on, don't make such a fuss. It's not like it was for anything important. Hearing those words, something inside me broke.
You better be responsible for your own words. What? It's your fault for leaving your credit card around like that. Don't joke. Even if it's for your parents, you can't just recklessly spend like that. You have no right to tell me that.
Realizing arguing was futile, I decided on a final course of action.
Fine. Hey, wait a sec.
I hung up and immediately called the police. Dylan had to face the consequences. There was no way I could forgive him. I'm Emily. 45 years old, working in sales at a cosmetics company. My family consists of my husband Dylan and our 18-year-old son Mike. Our relationship started through work and evolved from there.
Emily, do you plan to get married in the future?
What? Where has this come from? I was just thinking, since you're so beautiful. If we're talking about looks, Dylan, you're quite handsome yourself. Oh, come on. We were both 26, thinking about marriage. Such conversations became frequent, and before we knew it, we were dating. A year later, we got married. Dylan wanted me to be a housewife after marriage, but I wanted to continue working.
Since I'm going to keep working, how about we just merge our bank accounts? That might get confusing. Let's keep them separate.
Really? Well, I'll be the breadwinner, paying rent and groceries. You can handle the savings.
Okay then.
Living together revealed aspects of Dylan I hadn't noticed before. Discussing it with friends, they said it's often the case, which somewhat reassured me. Things were going well after that, so I didn't say anything too strongly to Dylan. Things went on like this until Mike was born a year into our marriage.
We really need to cut back on unnecessary expenses now that we have a child.
I was on maternity leave and decided to talk to Dylan when he got back from work. I thought that if I talked to him, he would understand.
You think I'm wasting money? I should be able to spend as I like sometimes. Of course, but my worry is that you're overspending. Ugh.
Dylan sighed, looking annoyed. I was worried if we were okay, being this way so early in our marriage. But the problem didn't solve itself as time went by. And the issues weren't just with Dylan.
My parents are coming over to visit soon. What? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Sorry, I totally forgot.
This was just the beginning. I was constantly being put in difficult situations by Dylan and my in-laws. And then, the following Saturday, my in-laws arrived.
Hello, Emily.
Long time no see. Please come in. Don't mind if I do. At first glance, the parents-in-law seemed quite caring, and to others, there seemed to be no issues. However, perhaps more like a parent and child, they were lax about managing money.
How about we go shopping today, since it's a special occasion? Shopping? Yes. There's something I've been wanting for a long time.
But since Mike was in a bad mood and wouldn't stop crying no matter what, I ended up staying home.
All right, I'm counting on you to house sit.
With that, Dylan left with the parents-in-law. When they returned about 2 hours later, I was surprised to see them.
What's with all those bags in your hands? Oh, these? Yeah, I guess I bought too much.
Moreover, the bags were printed with logos of famous brands.
We're back. Sorry for making you house sit. Oh, no, it's okay.
Mother-in-law Rebecca was also carrying bags similar to Dylan's. Then, sitting on the sofa, she started spreading out her purchases as if to show them off to me. I didn't own that much myself. Moreover, since getting married, I've been trying to save money, keeping the future in mind.
Thank you for today. I can't believe you bought me so much.
It's nothing to worry about. It's just filial piety. Plus, I got a lot too. Watching this exchange was almost headache-inducing.
Oh, right. This is for Mike.
Saying this, Dylan pulled out a piece of baby clothing from a brand.
We had to make you house sit, after all.
Father-in-law Bert said with a laugh. I had hoped they might have bought something for me too, but there was nothing, and Dylan and his parents seemed satisfied looking at their own things. The day ended with a family dinner and we said goodbyes, but there was another chance to meet the in-laws at a family gathering. Welcome. Thank you for having us today. Even I, who wasn't much interested in brands, could tell Rebecca was dressed head to toe in brand name clothes. You always seem so plain. This was said while we were drinking coffee in the living room. From the moment she arrived, Rebecca had been looking at me, and this was why.
I've been meaning to say this, but you need to take care of your appearance more.
Then Dylan joined the conversation.
What are you talking about?
About Emily being plain. Oh, that.
Yeah, I've been meaning to say same.
The reason for my plain appearance was because I had more important things to worry about than my own looks. Dylan freely spent money, but I was the one covering the costs from our savings. He didn't realize that our current lifestyle was thanks to that. During my 2-day stay at my in-laws, I had to put up with Rebecca's sarcasm the whole entire time. And upon returning home, Dylan started it with my appearance again.
Like Mom said at home earlier, you should take more care of your appearance. It's embarrassing for me too.
Unable to bear it any longer, I vented all my pent-up frustrations.
If you're embarrassed, then think a bit more about how you spend money. I've been saying this for a long time. Are we going to have that talk again? I'm tired of hearing it. Tired of hearing it? With Mike growing older, are you planning to keep living like this? Life is going on just fine, isn't it?
Dylan laughed and headed to the bedroom. Life went on like this, and before we knew it, Mike had become a junior in high school. Then, one summer afternoon, Dylan came up to me.
I have something I want to discuss.
Dylan wanting to discuss something was a bad omen. And as expected, my fears were confirmed.
A discussion? Sort out your money issues yourself.
Haven't said anything yet, have I? Can you pay for some living expenses instead? Had Dylan not listened to me at all? I was so astounded I didn't want to talk anymore.
By the way, what are you short on? What I'm short on? Everything. Everything? It hasn't even been a week since payday. Just help me out, okay?
Dylan didn't seem to feel any remorse towards me. Reluctantly, I convinced myself it was necessary for our livelihood. This is the last time, okay?
Yeah.
Even though we were still talking, Dylan was looking at his mobile phone, seemingly bored. And that wasn't all.
I'm going out for a bit. Wait. Where are you going? Don't need to tell you. I'll be back by night.
And then Dylan left the house. I was left alone in the living room, stunned. Honestly, I've considered divorce more than once or twice. But I didn't because of Mike. While I was thinking about this, Mike came.
Huh? Where's Dad?
He just went out.
Maybe he's gone to buy something again? You think so too?
Whenever Dylan went out alone without saying where he was going, he invariably ended up buying unnecessary things. As I sighed, Mike made a suggestion.
Why don't you just let it go? What?
I've been watching all this time, and it's clearly too much.
But you're still here. I can't do something so irresponsible. That's why I'm saying, once I graduate from college, I'll leave this house to work. Then, Mom, you can be free to do what you want.
Thank you. For Mike, who had been watching Dylan's reckless behavior, it must have been too much to tolerate. Mike's words were a relief to me. He was my son and we were a team. Dylan returned before dinner, as expected, with luxury items. If there was money to buy such things, it should be used for living expenses. I was too tired to even complain to Dylan. No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen and would do as he pleased. Sometime after I had covered Dylan's expenses.
Here. What's this? This is to cover what you paid for me the other day.
Saying that, Dylan handed me an envelope. Inside, there was money. Oh, thank you. I hadn't expected him to repay me so soon. When I checked the amount, it was $1,000. It wasn't enough to cover what I paid, but I still felt a little happy. But that brief joy soon turned into a nightmare.
All right, I'm taking this back. Hey, what are you doing?
Dylan snatched the envelope back from me and put it in his pocket.
I did pay you back, right?
I'll need it for tomorrow.
I don't understand what you're doing.
I was confused about what was happening. While I was in panic, Dylan continued.
Why are you surprised?
Look. Then Dylan handed me the envelope again, only to take it back. He repeated this a few times.
So, now I've paid back everything I owe you.
I had no energy left to argue back. It was like a child's way of pretending everything was settled.
If that's what you think, I won't lend you money again. Why does it come to that? I paid you back, didn't I? Forget it.
From that day, I grew to dislike even talking to Dylan. Whenever he asked for something, it was always about money. Even more troublesome were the in-laws. I thought they had been quiet lately, but then suddenly they contacted me.
We haven't received this month's allowance.
What?
Allowance? I haven't heard anything about it. That can't be. Dylan said you would start paying from this month.
It's too sudden, I can't.
We're in trouble too. We have payments to make. It's your problem, so sort it out. I need it by the day after tomorrow. Wait a minute, Rebecca.
She said what she wanted to say and just hung up. I was constantly troubled by this family. Just thinking about it gave me a headache. That night, I asked Dylan what was going on.
Rebecca called, but what's this about an allowance?
They seemed a bit troubled, so I've been sending them money for a while.
But why should I pay? I haven't heard anything about it.
Oh, did I forget to mention?
And you even told Rebecca that I would be making the deposit.
Then just send the allowance. However, I decided not to send the allowance. Nor did I contact the in-laws, ignoring whatever they said. Mike's exams were approaching, and I couldn't afford to focus on such things. Time passed, and Mike got accepted to his first choice of college.
Congratulations! You've been working hard for this.
The real challenge starts now.
Say something to him.
Well done. That was the only thing Dylan said without even looking at Mike.
Wait a minute.
I tried to say something to Dylan, but Mike stopped me. I guess Mike didn't have much expectation from Dylan either. Then trouble came when I went to the bank to pay Mike's tuition. When my number was called and I approached the counter, an unexpected incident occurred.
I'm sorry, but you cannot make a withdrawal. What?
It seems there is only $1 in your bank account.
Wait, there's got to be a mistake.
How did it come to this? I was just trying to withdraw money from the bank account for Mike's tuition payment. Then, a call came from the credit card company.
Hello?
We have noticed some unfamiliar usage on your credit card. Do you have any idea about this?
That can't be right. It has to be a mistake.
We have a record of the usage. There's a $30,000 charge on your account.
What?
I exclaimed louder than before. Other customers in the bank turned to look at me.
Ma'am? Sorry, could you give me a moment? I need to check something.
Understood. I had one suspicion in mind. I hung up and called someone.
Where are you now?
At home.
Why are you so panicky? Did you use my credit card?
There was a brief silence. Yeah, that. My parents wanted a new car, so I bought it for them in one go. Dylan laughed over the phone, without any sign of remorse. All the money I had saved for Mike's education.
Do you even realize what that money was for?
Come on, don't make such a fuss. It couldn't have been for anything important. Hearing those words, something inside me crumbled.
You better be responsible for your own words. What? Responsible? It's your fault for leaving your credit card out. Don't joke around. Even if it's for your parents, do you realize how stupid this is? I don't need to be lectured by you.
I realized it was futile to argue with Dylan. I decided to take the final step.
Fine then. Hey, wait.
I hung up the phone immediately and then contacted the police. Dylan would have to face the consequences. No matter what, I couldn't forgive this. When I got back home, I confronted Dylan.
You better pay back every penny you used without permission.
Sorry, I'm a bit busy right now.
What?
Dylan was getting ready to leave.
I told you I bought a car, right? They're treating me to dinner today. Is this really the time for that? We're not done talking yet.
Then we can talk when I get back. I'll be late if I stay now. Ignoring my attempts to stop him, Dylan was about to leave when I told him about notifying the police.
I just called the police.
He stopped in his tracks.
What did you say? Did I hear something about the police? It's not your imagination. What the hell did you do? It's obvious, isn't it? You used my credit card without permission. Taking someone's money like that is theft. Your money is mine too. I just used it. And now you're calling the police. What are you thinking? Anyways, pay back the full amount. And make sure you apologize to Mike too. Apologize? Why? Mike has nothing to do with this.
I sighed. Using the money for his own desires was just unbelievable.
That money you used was saved for Mike's entrance fees and tuition. But thanks to you, we can't even pay that now. Why didn't you tell me sooner? How could I expect you to do something this foolish?
Then he started blaming me.
Not realizing someone used your credit card, aren't you the foolish one?
My anger was rising.
Also, you've always looked down on me, haven't you? That's you. Don't you see me as anything more than a wallet?
What? You've become such a troublesome woman. I was about to utter the word divorce when Mike, who had been out, returned.
What are you doing?
Mike. Another fight? Give it a rest. His words were not directed at me, but at Dylan.
What's up? You got a complaint against me too?
It's not a complaint, it's a warning. If you keep this up, you'll regret it eventually.
Regret? You've become quite bold in talking back to Dad, haven't you?
Dylan even started snapping at Mike. I regretted ever marrying such a person.
Oh, right, I almost forgot to tell you, I'm going on a trip in a week. How can you be so selfish? I thought about taking you guys along, but changed my mind. Just stay home and behave.
Dylan laughed at us mockingly and left to buy things for his trip. Left behind, we looked at each other. I'm sorry, Mike. Your tuition. So that's why you were fighting. Now I couldn't even send him to college. Even though it was Dylan's fault, I wouldn't have been surprised if Mike blamed me. But instead of blaming, Mike was concerned about me.
It's not your fault, Mom. Dad's the one to blame. And it's not like I can never go to college.
I felt grateful to Mike for saying that, but was also filled with guilt. I decided I had to get revenge on Dylan to the end.
I need your help with something. Of course. I'm on your side, Mom.
So, we planned our strategy before Dylan returned. And then, in the morning a week later.
See ya. I'll be back the day after tomorrow.
I didn't even respond. What's with you? At least say something. Oh, and I paid for this trip with your credit card. Dylan left in a good mood. I wasn't even surprised to hear that. Is he gone?
Gone. Shall we start then? Yes, let's.
We packed up everything except Dylan's belongings. During this week, we had found a place to move to. We decided to move on the day Dylan went on his trip.
We're finally done.
It took quite some time. Just need to get the movers now. Soon the movers came. We left a note in the room and headed to the new apartment. I also decided to cancel the lease on the current apartment. I was the one who had originally signed the lease. Thus, a new life with Mike began. I wonder what he'll think when he gets back. He'll probably panic. But whatever happens, I don't care. Serves him right. The day Dylan was supposed to return from his trip arrived. Sure enough, there was a barrage of calls from Dylan. Curious about his reaction, I answered the phone.
Emily! Where are you?
I don't think I need to tell you that.
Stop joking around.
I think you're the one who's joking. Did you check the table?
The divorce papers?
Yes, those. My name is already on them.
Fine. Then we'll get divorced.
With that, Dylan hung up. The next day, Dylan sent a photo of the signed divorce papers. I felt relieved, but still had things to do. I immediately contacted a lawyer to get back the money he had used without permission. About a month later.
What do you mean move out?
A panicked call from Dylan came early in the morning. It means just that. I signed the lease, after all. I can do whatever I want with it, right?
I can't just accept that. Come back here now.
That's impossible. We're divorced, remember? I thought it was time to say everything I wanted to Dylan.
Also, I'm getting the money you used back through my lawyer. You did what?
Yes. I don't need to hold back anymore. So, I'll do as I please.
Who do you think allowed you to live like this? I certainly don't think it was thanks to you.
Even over the phone, I could tell Dylan was furious. But his anger couldn't change the reality. Just get out of that house quickly. It's not yours anymore.
You'll regret this.
He hung up, but I wasn't bothered. In fact, I laughed out loud. What happened? Sorry. That was him just now. And what did he say? Of course, he was angry. Told me that I'd regret this. What's that supposed to mean?
It's funny, isn't it?
After that, Dylan, unable to do anything, had to leave the house. He truly got what he deserved. Apparently, Dylan moved back to his parents' house, but that was a mistake. Dylan's hell was far from over. The next day after Dylan contacted me, the lawyer informed me that we could formally recover the money. It looked like we could also claim compensation for all the trouble he had caused.
How dare you do this to us?
Huh? The call from Rebecca was full of complaints.
Thanks to you, we're in trouble. We can't make our payments now. How are you going to fix this?
That's unfortunate. But it's no longer my problem, and you'll have to resolve it on your end.
You should pay in my place since it's your fault. Absolutely not. If you had any gratitude for the help we gave you, you should repay that kindness. I don't feel I owe you anything, so I'm fine. Goodbye.
This time, I was the one to hang up. It was a truly liberating moment. This outcome should have been easy to predict. A family all lax about money was bound to collapse eventually. Blinded by immediate desires, they failed to see the reality of their situation.
We finally got our money back.
Yes, but we couldn't make the college payment in time.
It's okay. I'll try again next year.
Mike was incredibly positive. Seeing him like that lifted my spirits. Later, I heard that Dylan and his family, unable to pay their debts, filed for bankruptcy. They ended up losing their house and were left wandering with no assets. I don't even know where they live now.
They filed for bankruptcy. Seems like it. It's their own responsibility.
Well, it's not our concern anymore. Dylan was also interviewed by the police but was just questioned. The police couldn't intervene further. However, this incident reached his workplace, and Dylan was apparently fired. He'll probably regret this for the rest of his life. I'm determined to keep moving forward with Mike, working together as a team.